Pamela Genini was only 29 years old, full of energy, curiosity, and the quiet confidence of a young woman who had just begun to build the life she always dreamed of. To her neighbors in the Gorla neighborhood of Milan, she was the kind of person who radiated warmth, always smiling, polite, and seemingly content. She had a small circle of close friends, people who knew her as kind-hearted but strong-willed, someone who never hesitated to speak her mind, but did so with grace. Behind that gentle smile, however, there was a growing unease that not many people could see. An invisible shadow that had slowly crept into her life. A relationship that had turned from affection to obsession, from love to control, and ultimately, from words to fatal violence. On what began as a normal day in Milan, the peace of the Gorla neighborhood was shattered by a horrifying act that sent shockwaves through the community. Pamela was stabbed to death on the terrace of her home, a place that should have been her sanctuary. The man accused of ending her life was not a stranger, not a thief, not some faceless attacker. He was her partner, Gianluca Sonsin, a 52-year-old man who, according to investigators, had been spiraling deeper into jealousy, possessiveness, and dangerous fixation. What unfolded that day was the tragic culmination of weeks, perhaps months, of threats, emotional torment, and psychological stalking that Pamela had endured mostly in silence. According to police reports and the statement from the Milan prosecutor's office, the attack was brutal and deliberate. Sonsin had arrived at Pamela's apartment armed with a knife he had brought from home, a chilling sign of premeditation. Witnesses reported hearing screams and a struggle before everything went quiet. When authorities arrived, they found Pamela fatally wounded on the terrace, her body bearing multiple stab wounds. The man responsible was nearby, bleeding from self-inflicted injuries after attempting suicide. He was rushed to Niguarda Hospital, where he was placed under police guard. Even in his hospital bed, the gravity of what he had done was impossible to ignore. Investigators quickly pieced together a disturbing timeline that revealed this was not a spontaneous crime of passion, but a deliberate act driven by obsession and cruelty. The prosecution, led by Alessia Menegazzo, requested that Sonsin be held in custody for aggravated homicide with premeditation and stalking. The indictment stated that he killed Pamela at the height of a series of stalking incidents, and after repeatedly threatening to kill her. The language of the charge was damning, emphasizing that this was not an isolated event, but the tragic endpoint of a long campaign of psychological terror. As the investigation unfolded, more disturbing details emerged. It was revealed that Sonsin had somehow managed to obtain a copy of Pamela's house keys, allowing him to enter her home without permission, a violation that turned her private space into a place of fear. This discovery only reinforced the prosecution's argument that his actions were calculated and that he had been watching her, possibly planning the attack for days, if not weeks. Among the aggravating factors listed by prosecutors were futile motives and cruelty, two phrases that perfectly captured the senselessness and brutality of his crime. Despite the clear pattern of threats and stalking behavior, no formal stalking complaint had ever been filed against Gianluca Sonsin by Pamela, at least not in Milan. Friends and neighbors would later tell investigators that Pamela had often appeared anxious and fearful in the weeks leading up to her death. Some recalled moments when she had confided in them about her partner's controlling tendencies, how he would show up unexpectedly, follow her, or call her incessantly when she didn't answer his messages. There were reports that she had tried to distance herself from him, attempting to end the relationship, but he refused to let go. Those who knew her said she had wanted peace, not confrontation. She believed that if she remained calm and kind, perhaps he would eventually move on. Sadly, that hope cost her life. The picture that emerged of Sonsin was that of a man whose love had curdled into obsession, a pattern that investigators discovered was not entirely new. Although there were no recent records of complaints or charges, initial investigations uncovered a history of domestic abuse in his past, dating back nearly 15 years. While those earlier incidents had not been deemed serious enough at the time to warrant criminal charges, they revealed an aggressive nature that hinted at something darker, a personality prone to dominance, control, and violence when challenged. People who had once known him described him as intense, sometimes charming but easily angered. He had a temper that could ignite suddenly, and when it did, it was frightening. During his relationship with Pamela, that temperament began to resurface. He allegedly made multiple death threats, not only toward her, but also against members of her family. Still, each time the threats were brushed aside or minimized, often by Pamela herself, who likely believed that he was simply acting out of jealousy or frustration. Like many victims of emotional abuse, she may have struggled to see the situation for what it truly was, a dangerous cycle of control that was escalating toward physical violence. Friends recalled that in the beginning, Gianluca seemed caring, even protective. He was older, more experienced, and had the kind of confidence that initially made Pamela feel secure. But over time, that protectiveness turned suffocating. He began to question where she was going, who she was seeing, and why she wasn't answering her phone quickly enough. Small arguments turned into accusations, and affectionate concern became relentless surveillance. He wanted to know everything about her, every call, every message, every move. When she resisted, he retaliated with emotional manipulation, threats, and guilt. The transformation was slow but unmistakable. Those close to Pamela could sense her distress. She would sometimes make excuses for his behavior, saying that he just worried too much, or that he didn't mean to be so intense. But beneath those reassurances, there was fear. She had confided in at least one friend that she was considering ending the relationship for good. She had begun to feel trapped, unable to breathe, constantly watched. Every attempt to pull away seemed to provoke him further, as if her independence was an insult to his control. The day she decided to reclaim her life may have been the day he decided he couldn't let her go. Investigators believe that Gianluca's decision to bring a knife from home shows clear premeditation. He didn't lose control in a spontaneous fit of rage. He made a choice. The act of taking that weapon, walking into her home, and confronting her meant he had already crossed the line long before the first blow was struck. When questioned in the hospital, he reportedly said very little, showing a kind of detached resignation rather than remorse. To the police, it seemed as though he knew this was how it would end, that he had planned not only to take her life, but possibly his own. As word of Pamela's death spread, Milan was gripped by sorrow and anger. Vigils were held in Gorla, with candles, flowers, and handwritten notes placed outside her apartment building. Neighbors who had known her spoke through tears about how vibrant and kind she had been. "She didn't deserve this," one woman said, her voice breaking. "She just wanted to live her life, to be happy." Many in the community expressed frustration that more hadn't been done to protect her, that the warning signs were there. But like so many cases of intimate partner violence, they were dismissed until it was too late. Italy, like many countries, continues to struggle with the epidemic of femicide, the murder of women by their partners or former partners. Pamela's story, though deeply personal, is part of a wider national tragedy. Statistics show that dozens of women in Italy are killed each year by men they once loved or trusted. Activists and advocacy groups have long called for stronger measures to prevent these crimes, better education, more accessible resources for victims, and faster intervention when early signs of stalking or domestic violence appear. Pamela's death became another heartbreaking reminder of how easily these warning signs can be overlooked, even in a modern city like Milan.